All right. Today, my guest is David, and he is it safe to say that you're an expert on cults?
Ooh, maybe
No, or
not.
is that maybe not? All right.
Maybe not. But I mean, I've been studying via started out kind of via trolling Scientology, actually. Well, it started before that, but I've been like looking into cults and cult-like groups, particularly how new sort of cults have formed online
Oh
and how
yeah, that's interesting.
how the rules maybe for a cult online are different than if you go to a place for a cult. And
Hmm.
so, but some of the control and demand aspects are still there. Um, just a little bit about myself. I'm a producer at Echoplex Media. We are the scariest part of left Twitch, probably because we don't, we're not doing political philosophy. We're talking about extremism and control groups and the things that happen to people and the kinds of communities that form around them. So it's a little bit scary. It's a good thing we have a really good, solid community of mostly kind assholes, I suppose, that watch our shows.
Hey,
So,
I guess if a kind assholes got to be the best kind of assholes.
well, if you're covering stuff that's like, a little bit troubling, you gotta have people around. You can't have a bunch of assholes in your community because then it's just bad news for everybody. I think my interest
Exactly.
in cults probably maybe when I was a kid, I was like vaguely aware of the Satanic Panic. I remember the Night Stalker, and I was always kind of interested in that stuff. Like when I was a kid, I was probably just afraid of the Night Stalker, right? I mean, you
Hmm.
got a name like the Night Stalker, and he's
So
floating around where you live, you're afraid of him.
refresh my memory. I'm not familiar with the Night Stalker.
Oh, you know what? I don't remember his name. He was Northern California Bay Area. It was just all over the news. It was how the news does this. Something
Yeah.
scary is going on. They cover it. I was just kind of using that as an example, but I was a kid then. I guess my interest in cults and control groups started when my friend ran off and joined the Scientology mothership when I was in my mid 20s. I
Oh
was like,
man.
what is this thing? And then I found out. I was like, oh, this is bad. This is bad. I was like, this is
Yeah,
not
yeah.
great.
So let's hop into that, man. I think that's a good way to start this conversation. So you said you had a friend join the Scientology mothership. So
Well, I mean, it's sort of a joking way to talk about it. There is no
yeah,
spaceship. Yeah, at least not that we know of. They may have one. Who knows? Maybe
yeah,
that's where all everybody's money's going.
yeah. I know they have some kind of compound, some kind of secretive compound where they have. I'm drawing a blank right now. That the author who wrote Dianetics, what is his name again?
L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard. They have his teachings engraved on like these steel plates or something like that.
I think they
In
might be
this
gold,
gold plates. All right.
and they're hidden in the side of a mountain. They actually have a show about it because they have a 24-hour network that runs like on Direct TV, which is I think pretty fucking crazy. Um,
Wow.
but they have the show called Inside Scientology, and one of the shows is actually about the process of engraving those things. They've got it in
Hmm.
the side of a mountain on like kind of like springs, sort of. So that if there's an earthquake or they set a nuclear blast, because of course everything's turned up to 11 with those fucking people. Um,
Yeah.
it would survive because of I'm not sure it's spring loaded, but it's sort of the idea, right? That it will move inside of it if there's like an earthquake or whatever. And so they keep all that out there. I don't think that's at one of their main places where they keep humans. I think that may be at a different location because they got all these different locations all over the country. They don't have but 10,000 members maybe in the world, but they sure have a lot of real estate.
Yeah, yeah. It's like it combines two scary things. One is a corporation. Corporations, they have too much power in our society, in my opinion. And then you combine a corporation with a religion. And it's like it's an unholy abomination. And the fact that this has been allowed to go on for so long, I mean, you know, and it's dangerous, is what it is. Why this cult is just allowed to proliferate, and you know, why is it allowed? What is going on? Do they have leverage on people, or
I think it's just the courts have decided that it's their First Amendment right as a religion. We have Congress shall enact no law respecting the establishment of a religion. They put it first. So like freedom of religion is kind of, a big deal here in the United States. And, but
True.
for the most part, it's super, super good. But there are obviously, any rights and freedoms you have are going to come with people that are going to abuse those rights and freedoms. It's just this Scientology is just the most extreme case where it's like the most obvious to people. And the fact that it's a little bit weird kind of attracts people to it too. Like not
Hmm.
members, but it attracts interest to it. It attracts scrutiny. It attracts negative, they would call it bad press, I suppose.
Hmm.
So that's why people know about it. But there's all kinds of little they call them, I think the way to talk about it is like new religious groups, right? Where they because you can't just run around calling everything you think is weird a cult, because then nothing is a cult. Um,
Exactly.
but they have every right to form new religious groups, and most of them are just weird. But you get you get too much power in the hands of too few people, like you were saying, in a corporation and any structure. You get a couple bad people near the top of that organization, and that organization is just going to be a bad organization. It's going to be real bad for the people on the bottom, no matter what it is.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So let's. I know you said you had a friend that ran away and joined Scientology. I don't want to get too personal. Is that something you want to delve into?
I can just say that we haven't really heard from her in nearly 20 years, and a couple people tried to talk to her. I wasn't the one, right? I had a couple of my more maybe spiritual friends. We were all going to raves back then, so I knew a couple people with like dreadlocks who thought that everything was energy, and I was like, oh, maybe they can help, right? Because
Hmm.
I wasn't the one, right? I'm not spiritual at all, not religious, and I don't think if she was going on what she thought was a spiritual journey, I certainly wasn't going to be able to help get her out, because all she was going to hear from me was, oh, that's just another one of those edgy atheists or whatever, and so she joined, and I don't know really what happened to her after. I hope she's out.
Yeah, I hope so too. It seems to be pretty common. I hear stories about people joining Scientology and then just cutting off, all their friends and family, and which it seems to be pretty common with cults. They cut you off from your support group. So how do how does Scientology go about that? How do they go about cutting people off from family?
Fairly explicitly, honestly. It's
Yeah.
in some of their writings. It's a policy called disconnection, where like if you are, let's say you and me are friends, and we like to go out, drinking or play pool, or riding bikes or whatever it might be, right? And then you
Hmm.
join the cult, and I start telling you, hey, that's a dangerous place. I think they're going to take advantage of you, take your money. Well, that cult, if they find out a little bit about me, they're going to declare me a suppressive person, and now you can't talk to me, because your goal is to save the world through Scientology, and I am trying to stop you.
I see how they do it. It says save the world. I've seen some of their media that they put out, and they have this idea that they're trying to save the world. Like, save the world from what exactly? What is it? Like, what draws people to Scientology?
So I can only, like, I know through having been covering this, I've met a lot of former Scientologists, and honestly, it's they're pretty manipulative. So it depends. Some people go in there with drug problems, right? And if their
Hmm.
family got a little bit of money, they go through. There's a front group for Scientology called Narcanon, which sounds a little bit like Narcotics Anonymous, which it seems a little sneaky. Um,
Yeah.
and so those people get in thinking they're going to drug rehab, and then they're subjected to uh, what I guess I would call torture. They're told to eat a bunch of like niacin and B vitamins, and then sit in a sauna for many more hours than any doctor would tell you to ever sit in a sauna, and they just get their brain scrambled in there as as you're coming off like you're coming off a chemical dependency. You're in, it's tough. I've luckily never had to deal with anything too serious myself, but you're coming off of something strong like benzodiazepine, or cocaine, methamphetamine, and opiates or whatever, and you're already like, just from the withdrawals, you're going to be not yourself, not living your best life. Like I said, then they stuff you in a sauna for 6 or 8 hours a day. They're
Yes.
scrambling your brain like those, like people say the military will break you down and build you back up. I think
Mhm.
they're trying to do a version of that in this. But that's not I don't think the most common way. I think the most common way is people just are looking for something, right? Like you don't know everything. And so you're like, "Oh, what's this?" And maybe you've never heard about it and you go in and they give you a personality test and then they give you a communication course or something and you give them like $20 and you're like, "Oh, this seems all right." And then, through talking to you, they find out maybe what's bothering you and then they just stick their thumb in whatever that is.
Oh, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, then. Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. The screen just froze. But you were saying they find out what your issue is and they stick your thumb into it, or they stick their thumb into it.
Yeah. And then they call it help, right?
Hmm.
They say that that they're helping you, but a lot of times if you go to like auditing, this is where you've seen the pictures, right? Where they hold the
Hmm.
soup cans and they ask you questions and use that weird looking machine. Well, they're taking a lot of
Hmm.
notes on you. And so, you know, they they just they figure out what it is that you want and they try to tell you that they're giving it to you. Luckily, it doesn't work on most people, right? And it isn't that some people are stupid and some people are smart or some people are gullible. It's just like what is bothering you and maybe who's talking to you and are they able to do it? Like are they able to like make you think that they're helping you?
Gotcha. What is the average life for a person in Scientology like? I mean,
So it depends. There's people called public Scientologists, which just means they
hmm
go to like it's almost like just going to church, right? Just people
hmm
just go to church. You probably go a little more often, maybe than the average churchgoer in, I don't know, mainline American Christianity or whatever. But you have a job, you have friends, you kind of live a normal life, and you're a Scientologist. But those people are to some extent expected to recruit. Those are usually people with money, or maybe people that the cult has determined are not going to be in the second category, right? Where for whatever reason, maybe they don't think they'll get them to do it, or they're a little too independent for the second category. And the second category is basically staff, where you work there and it's your life. And that's up to and including they have something called the Sea Org because L.
I've
Ron
heard of
Hubbard
that.
he was obsessed with the Navy and the military. I don't know why, but he dressed everybody in the Sea Org like a bellhop, not like a Navy person. But that's the first one is you're on staff and that's your job. They don't pay you very well. You may live in Scientology housing, a higher level of control, right? Because not only is that your religion or whatever that you go to, but now it's your job. It's where your money comes from, and they're probably providing you housing because they sure ain't paying you enough to afford housing in anywhere.
Hmm.
And then a step up from that is a thing called the Sea Org, where you have to sign that billion-year contract, and you live in like a basically like a barracks, and that's over in Clearwater, Florida. And that's like the highest level of control where like you have to call everyone sir and you can't really go anywhere. If you go somewhere it's because they told you to and you're like in a line of them. You've seen those images from Clearwater, Florida, maybe, where there's just lines of people from the cult of Scientology just walking down the street almost like in formation. And you're like, well, that's a little creepy, isn't it? And that's
Hmm.
those people. I'm sure there are other like distinctions within the organization, but those are like sort of the different ways in which you can be a Scientologist, and it's definitely going to affect your day to day, whether or not you are under their thumb in that particular way.
Here's the thing that gets me about Sea Org is that they make you sign that billion year contract. My question is, how do you know, like, when the billion years are up? You
That's a
know,
good
like,
question.
do they ever think about that? Like, so I'm assuming that they believe in reincarnation. They believe that, what, like, will be reborn and they'll seek out Sea Org in another life or something?
Oh, that's close enough. Yeah, I think they think that you get like a 23-year. I forget what number. It's a random number of years that you get like a vacation in, I don't know, wherever. I don't know where they think your soul goes. But you get a break right after you leave your human body. You get a break. I don't know. Does
Mm.
somebody serve you cocktails somewhere? I don't know. Probably not, because whatever their break is, you're probably doing slave labor on some, in like the 19th dimension or something. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, they must believe in reincarnation, but I will say that it doesn't seem to be a big part of the lore or of the like the spiritual beliefs.
yeah, I got you. So what does Sea Org do? Do they like travel the world? What is it that they're doing on those boats?
So that was originally what the Sea Org was. They had a boat called the Apollo, and that was where L. Ron Hubbard had mostly teenage girls on the boat
Mm.
with him. These the cult story. Come on, it always ends up with like 16-year-old
Yeah,
girls. You can't. There's no
yeah,
cult story
always.
if it's an old dude at the top. It's always 16-year-old girls, right? That part always comes. So they were supposed to like take care of the boat, but now the Sea Org is bigger than that, and their new boat, the Free Winds, isn't really a work ship so much as like some of the more there are people on it working, but it's also like a thing that they show off to some of their richer members. So they'll have like concerts and events, and they'll have like, the Sea Org people waiting on, maybe not Tom Cruise specifically, but someone of that stature, like kind of hand and foot on the boat. So that
Hmm.
person thinks that like that's what their money's going, and they think that they're also probably shown a rosier than real picture of what's going on for the people who live on the boat. But the rest of the Sea Org actually lives in Clearwater, Florida. And to be honest, there's not a whole like we've even, I've talked to former Sea Org members, and it's unclear what they do day to day, like what their job is, other than to basically probably like maintenance on this building.
So when you've interviewed former Sea Org people,
Several, yeah.
yeah, and then, so what do they say they do? Are they able to say? Are they like beholden to some kind of non-disclosure clause or something? Or
Luckily enough, that billion-year contract isn't anything that's ever going to be enforced by a court of law, right? Like
Mhm.
courts do some dumb stuff, but please. So, they most of them talked about that they were once they entered the Sea Org, the big thing is like, let's say you're married, right? And you enter the
Mhm.
Sea Org. Well, now you're married on paper, but you ain't never seeing your spouse anymore, right? They mostly talked about like the regimented day-to-day control that was going on there, because that's sort of probably the thing that they remember most, right? If you're in that and you get out, you probably remember the control a lot more than you remember necessarily on Tuesdays. Do I scrub the toilets? You know what I'm saying?
Mhm. That's wild, man. I guess I should be happy that, I've come from a loving background and I don't get wrapped up in this kind of stuff. But I just can't imagine somebody like being at the point in their life where they would sign, even though a billion-year contract is ridiculous. We know that. I know that. But what kind of person would do that and not realize that it's ridiculous? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, where do you have to be in life to get preyed upon by a cult?
Well, by the time they sign this billion-year contract, I mean they've probably been in for a while. Do you know what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
They don't lead with the billion-year contract. They lead with the personality test and a communication course where maybe even some of the information in the communication course is good for you. There
Yeah.
you can't hook people in just by scaring the shit out of them. So I think by the time most people join the Sea Org, they're already on staff and their life is Scientology. And
Mhm.
I assume most of them believe they are going to save the world. Otherwise, like, why would they do that?
Save the world from what?
Um, they, one of their big things is, they don't like psychiatry and the mental health field. That's one of the things, but they also think they can just prevent war. Just
Mm.
randomly, 'cause that's what you do from a boat in a hotel. You stop all the wars, you know.
If they need to go over to Ukraine, then, you
Yeah,
know?
well, but that's the thing is it doesn't have to make sense to you and me, and the fact that they're not doing it yet means that the people in the cult need to work harder.
Oh, I see.
You know what I'm saying? This is aspirational. They don't think Scientology has saved the world. They it's they believe that they can.
Hmm. How do they make money, Scientology? I mean, they're a billion-dollar corporation. Where does their money come from? Are the members giving over their paychecks to the corporation or?
Yes. that, and they a lot of their real estate they've had for a long time, so they were able to buy it at a more reasonable price. Um, they do get like the estimates of the amount of money that Tom Cruise has given them range from 10 to 150 million dollars and up. So they got a couple big fish in there.
That's wild, man. So speaking of Tom Cruise, I mean, he's the biggest man in Hollywood, but he's in a cult. And it's crazy how the mainstream media just kind of lets that go, Like he came out with the newest Mission Impossible, which was a good movie, not gonna lie, I saw it. But like we just let it slide, you know?
They want access to him bad enough. I bet he has contract, maybe not a billion-year contract for the media, but before he takes an interview, I bet his agent sends him something, right?
Yeah, yeah. So what is his life like? What do you know about him and his connection to Scientology?
Very little. If you've noticed, he's a pretty private guy compared to a lot of other public figures, right? You don't hear about him
Mm,
partying. If he's dating somebody, maybe you hear about it, but you don't know if he's dating somebody right now. He stays away from the tabloids. But I presume that there's somebody or a group of people in Scientology whose job it is to shield him from other stuff that's going on so that he doesn't necessarily know, right? That would be in
yeah.
their interest because you don't know if he would or he wouldn't, but you get a couple celebrities, that find out what's going on and they buck all of a sudden. Now as an organization like Scientology, you got a problem.
And he's not the only celebrity that's connected to Scientology. There's a bunch of them. Like I think Will Smith, he's connected to Scientology.
They that one's a little dicey. They used maybe I shouldn't even because I don't understand it completely. I guess rumors are that they used some of the Scientology literature in a private school that they had worked on or worked with, but
Hmm.
I don't think him and Jada were ever in, like that they were ever, going to services. They may have gone to one or two events because they knew people, but I don't think they
Yeah.
were ever going in. One of the one of the things you'll notice if you watch their events, not a lot of color in the audience.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, black people, we don't really get caught up in cults that believe in galactic federations and things like that.
Well, and they the L. Ron Hubbard was just a giant racist piece of shit too. So it might be
Yeah.
that also could, filter down into even today's version of the cult where people
I
don't
didn't know
even
that
know.
actually.
People, maybe they get some black folks inside and then the people in there like, are like, "Hey, what's up, homie?" And then the black people are like, "Oh, I gotta go."
I actually didn't know that about L. Ron Hubbard. So he was a racist. What are some, does he like, is he on record saying horrible things about people, black people or anything like that? Or
He was a big fan of the nation of South Africa during apartheid, that's for sure.
gotcha.
You don't spend a lot of time over there as a rich white guy if you don't like what's going on. You got a lot of choices for places to hang out, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Also said nice things about Rhodesia when Rhodesia was a, it was.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is like when he was writing fiction, that stuff's all public, but the stuff that's like internal, they kind of keep it covered up. So if there's anything internal that was maybe racist in a way that they don't want to put out there, they're just not going to put it out there.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you have his actions to go on, but again, there are a lot of rich white guys at that time, but most of them didn't hang out in South Africa as like one of their favorite places. That's a choice.
Yeah. Exactly. It is. Now, one thing I heard, and I don't know if this is true, but they said L. Ron Hubbard was the most prolific writer of all time. Like he wrote the most books of any author. Is that true?
It depends on what you consider to be a book, I suppose, because he was writing
Yeah.
those pulp fiction novels and those like they were like male adventure kind of novels. You've seen the
Yeah.
covers where it's like, it'd be like a dude fighting 1,000 crabs that are all the size of a dog or something, right? You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, you called
Yeah.
are those books? If those are books, then maybe yeah, he wrote the most words ever, I think they say, which is weird.
That is weird.
That is
Yeah.
weird. It's a
So,
quantity, not quality.
gotcha. So what led him to create this? I know that's kind of a broad question, but was it just control? He's just an evil guy, which that's yeah, it's safe to say he was evil, but like what is the story with the creation of this?
I think it was money
Yeah.
because he got, those people writing those kind of like pulp fiction novels, they were making more maybe than somebody doing the same thing would today because you can't make no money in media today. But
Mm,
he wanted to make money, and so he wrote this self-help book. People liked it, and he sort of started a cult around it. It seems like it happened kind of slow at first. Like there wasn't all these buildings. It was less leaning in on the control. There were independent places, doing Dianetics and stuff. And at some point, it became centralized. And I don't know the history on that. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody like articulate it in like just a couple sentences. I think it's actually pretty complicated.
yeah, yeah. I want to go back to the whole Hollywood aspect of it. So, there's Tom Cruise, but what other like actors are connected to this?
Nancy Cartwright voices Bart Simpson.
Oh
Um,
no, not The Simpsons. I didn't know that, man.
I might make Shaka Khan.
What? Are you serious?
That one pissed me off too because I'm a big
Yeah,
fan of like disco and funk music, and that one fucking pissed me
yeah. I know
off.
Isaac Hayes was
Yeah, he's in there.
yeah.
John Travolta, everybody knows about. Chick Corea, who recently passed away, a famous jazz musician, was in there. Beck's family was in there, but Beck himself says he was never really in there. And he was like a famous musician, so they would have mostly left him alone if he wanted to be left alone, like if he was
Yeah.
given any money. Um, a lot of oh, what's her Tommy Davis's mom? I forget. Oh, this older lady. She's really famous too, and I can't believe I'm blanking out on her name. Um, oh, I mean, Kirstie Alley before she passed away was a Scientologist.
Mm, that's wild, man.
I
And
mean,
it's
I'm
like,
missing so many. Like,
yeah,
there's a
it
lot of
seems like
people.
it's yeah, it seems like it's a lot. I wonder, it's like, if someone is young and they want a career in Hollywood, they want to be a famous actor, is that something that they do? They seek out Scientology and say, hey, can you make me famous or something like that? Or do they seek out people that are already famous?
Um, Probably both. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if people go, "Hey, I'm going to go join a cult to get famous," but Scientology has like all these groups that don't call themselves Scientology. They offer acting classes, which are just recruiting. They're
Hmm.
they're a guy that I interviewed. It wasn't during my interview, but recently he was talking on his YouTube channel about how there was this house where all these kind of actors hung out, and it was like a Scientology house, and there would be Scientologists and non-Scientologists, mostly young people who were interested in getting into acting, and he said that's just the path that a lot of actors follow is that particular house, just because like a cool place to be, and famous people might pop by, and so those people then through I don't even know what mechanism, because like the way he tells it, all of a sudden he was at the Scientology Center, right? And
Hmm.
so, but I imagine that, that being the case, there then people who go to that house or they have other events like acting classes, courses, seminars, people in the industry that are trying to break in are going to go to courses, seminars. There's around any industry, there's around the fringes of it, there's always a grift, right? And
Yeah.
acting, Scientology, I think, exists on that sort of fringy part where the grift is, where there's all these coaches who probably aren't going to help you get a role, but they're certainly going to take $500 from you. And I think Scientology kind of exists in that space. And what I think they do probably is figure out like who might be somebody down the road, and then they might love bomb that person, bring that person in, and have them be a public Scientologist again, where they're allowed to go out and do their acting, and they're not always at the Scientology Center.
I've also heard that they have like the LAPD on their payroll. Is that true at all? Like one thing I
That
heard
might
is that
be that might be exaggerated and oversimplified.
mm,
Um, but the LAPD doesn't not like them.
Hmm.
They have they'll have a police chief sometimes, or high ranking sergeant at their events. Not like as because cops show up at public events all the time as security or whatever, but not like that. Like they'll be on stage speaking, so they're in with some of the police forces, but it's not just LAPD. People who aren't, and I'm from the Bay, but people from down there know that the Hollywood has a different police department, and they're up with the Hollywood police too. Probably a little more with the Hollywood PD because it's a smaller police department, and Scientology really cares about Hollywood.
Yeah, that's wild, man. So you said you've spoken to former members. How does somebody go about breaking free of Scientology?
It depends. I've The stories range from I just didn't go back and told them to go fuck themselves when they kept trying to call me to, people who were on staff or at one of the more secluded locations, like having to sneak off of the base. There was one lady, I haven't interviewed her. I feel like she's been through enough. I don't need to re-traumatize her. But she escaped by finding an unlocked trunk of a car while she was supposedly cleaning the parking lot and just waiting.
Wow. So she just climbed into the trunk and just sat it out.
Yeah,
Man,
she had said that she had to find a new enough car that it had like a trunk. You know how the newer cars, so you can't get locked in the trunk. They got the trunk release inside the trunk. She had to find a new
yeah.
enough car that had that with the trunk open, and she'd been trying to do it over and over again. Another guy, like he was on one of I think the base in Hemet, California, that he had a motorcycle because he ran errands, and he just split on the motorcycle one day, just in the middle of the night. They got him back in, and he split on the motorcycle again, and he got out the second time.
Oh man. And yeah, w- the amount of conditioning they have to put on people and to keep them in there, and like there's so many secrets within this organization. One of them is the Shelly Miskovich, supposedly is the wife of the CEO
That's David
of,
Miscavige. Yeah,
yeah, David, and she just disappeared. Nobody's seen her in like a couple decades, right?
I think it's almost like 15 years, something like that, maybe a little more. Yeah, I mean, nobody knows. The best best speculation I've heard is they kind of Truman showed her where she's probably somewhere thinking she's saving the world. She's not, right? She's a prisoner, but she doesn't know it. That's like
Damn,
probably what's like because she was like a high ranking member, right? So she was a true believer. So it doesn't take a lot of assumptions to think that maybe they harnessed that true belief and told her that she had an important mission to go on and then just stuck her somewhere. Like,
that's wild,
I'm
man.
sorry for laughing about that. The woman's being held captive, but or maybe
Yeah,
not even
see,
being held captive. She might like it there, right? She might have like a place, might be like a beautiful place that she just can't leave, right?
yeah. That's so she was a real true believer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was in from the time that she was a kid. So was the leader, her husband, David Miscavige. They got married
Mhm.
pretty young. And yeah, I mean, either that or she decided she wasn't a true believer and something else happened to her, which I hope, hope they didn't do something. The thing is, like, the LAPD claims to have proof that she's alive because the people have filed missing reports on her, and the LAPD claims that they have proof that she's alive. I don't know, LAPD maybe not the most trustworthy organization to ever inhabit this here planet, but you can't do anything after that, right? Because it's if she is alive and she's not complaining that she's been kidnapped, then she has every right to hide or do whatever she wants to do.
Yeah, true. So David Miskovich, what's his story? You said he was raised in Scientology?
Very young. Yeah, something he said it cured his asthma.
Hmm.
Um, you know, people yeah, some young people have asthma and as they grow older it just goes away. I
Yeah,
think that's the
same
most
here.
yeah, I think that's the most likely scenario there. You wait, a space alien didn't cure your asthma?
Nah, man, just went away, you know? Or who knows? Maybe Zimu came into my bedroom at night and put his hands on me and took it away. But you know, it's wild. So David Miskovich, so he was raised in Scientology. And then he handpicked by L. Ron Hubbard to
Nobody was
nobody
actually.
was.
When L. Ron died, there was a power struggle. There were people who were like sort of the heir apparent, but
Hmm.
that's not how it shook out. David Miscavige, when L. Ron Hubbard started making crappy movies, he moved from making crappy books to making crappy movies. David Miscavige was a cameraman, pretty young when he was doing the camera work and doing like production work and stuff. So he was pretty close to L. Ron and knew a lot of people that were powerful in the organization. And so he was able to essentially, I could almost call it like a coup against the heir apparents to the throne or whatever they have, the flying space chair. I don't know what they have. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, he took it over. Actually, it was a lot of hurt feelings, but the people who were the heir apparents got out, so that's good for them, right? When that happened, they left. I don't know if they were forced out or they left, but my understanding is they're no longer Scientologists. So I think it's better to not be a Scientologist than to be the head of Scientology. But it was
Exactly.
yeah, he's a pretty aggressive guy. He's little, but he's aggressive, and it's not like people were willing to match his aggression. There's no indication that he used violence or the threat of violence to gain control of Scientology, but I think it was more like manipulation. He manipulated people and kind of got what he wanted, which is not surprising now. He's the leader of the cult now. So how
Yeah,
else do you become?
manipulation.
Yeah.
Yeah, manipulation is par for the course when you're a cult leader.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but are you looking to reach a dynamic and engaged audience of curious minds? Well, look no further. Bright Brains Podcast is the perfect platform to showcase your business or product. You'll be able to reach a diverse and intelligent audience and engage with listeners passionate about personal development, technology, and more. Elevate your brand through thought-provoking discussions. Don't miss this opportunity to promote your business on one of the fastest growing podcasts in the market. Contact us today to discuss advertising options and elevate your brand to the next level. Contact us at brightbrainspod@gmail.com to secure your advertising spot on Bright Brains today. Again, that's Bright Brains with a Z pod pod at gmail.com. Now, back to the podcast.
So I want to kind of switch gears. You mentioned something. You said control group,
Yeah.
right? What's the difference between a cult and a control group?
So like if I'm just talking to you at the bar, right, and I just met you, I'd tell you I'm into cults, right?
Hmm.
Because that's you're most people are going to understand that, and if they're asking about like what I do on my shows or whatever. But I think a better way to talk about it, if you're maybe if I was going to write a book, or if I write something from my blog, which I should probably write for more, um, I would use maybe terms like control and demand groups, just because it's more accurate and it covers more ground, and then you don't have to necessarily, if for a cult, you usually think of something with a physical building, whereas a demand and control group could just be a Facebook group where
Hmm.
everybody's just way too interconnected and way too up into everybody's business, where language is controlled, where they do some version of disconnection, but you can't really enforce it because it's on like in a Facebook group or something like that. So I think it just covers more ground and allows you to, or it allows me, and I'm not the one who came up with it or whatever, but it allows me to talk about similarities in different groups and different organizations without just calling them all a cult and making everybody think of Scientology, because not every control and demand group is like Scientology. And I think especially with all the media around Scientology, you say cult, people either think of that or like Heaven's Gate or like the Jim
Hmm.
Jones cult. And that's not, those are the examples that made the news, but that's not every demand or control group.
So, what are some examples of demand and control groups that you currently see now? I know you mentioned earlier about social media, and you also just mentioned about Facebook. So, I'm assuming that there's something going on in the internet, and I think I might know. But what are some examples of things that you see?
You know, some of those multi-level marketing schemes end up being high control, high demand groups once you get in,
Hmm.
right? You think you're
Yeah.
gonna, the joke is that, oh, girl boss or whatever, right? But you think
Hmm.
you're gonna go in, you're gonna be your own boss, and now all of a sudden, you it's not really a job so much, where it becomes a lifestyle. And then if your friends don't want to join the MLM, the people in the MLM tell you that they're not supporting your business. And that's not really controlling you, but they're certainly manipulating you into maybe not wanting to be around your friends that are like, hey, why are you trying to sell me this weird cologne? I don't want this cologne. This cologne sucks. You smell like shit, friend. Don't wear this cologne. Like, or whatever it is, right? It's because it could be anything. And so
Yeah.
that's an example I think people understand. But I mean, there are, you could have a demand control group of two. It could be an abusive relationship, even an abusive friendship, where
Yeah.
so it's all encompassing. And it's about uh, control of some combination of your movement, your association, or the information you're allowed to access, right? You meet somebody where somebody else or some group is controlling who they're allowed to talk to, what they're allowed to talk about, and where they're allowed to get their information. You start thinking about what's going on with that person you just met.
Yeah. It feels like right now the country is kind of in this kind of culture war, right? And I feel like a lot of this left wing and right wing stuff is kind of taking on some kind of cult like qualities to it. You know, I remember one time around the Donald Trump election, I n- I tuned into Alex Jones. This is the first time I had listened to him, and I was really weirded out by the people who would call in. They kind of like were looking to him as like some kind of like savior, and they were like, you're the only one who can save us from the globalists. We need you. Blah blah blah. And what it shows me is that nowadays with the internet, a person who has charisma, they can get on there and they can like kind of spread their influence very easily. In fact, it's kind of interesting how we call these people influencers, right? And these
Right.
influencers, they get on Twitter, they get on Twitch. Like Twitch is the big one, and you'll have these e-girls on Twitch who are just playing games, and guys are just giving them their whole paychecks and things like that.
Yeah, and there's a couple things going on there. One that I'm not super like I don't super know a lot about. Like, some of them are just using sex appeal to get money from men who maybe um, don't get to hang out with women in real life who have sex appeal or whatever. But then
Hmm.
some of them do sometimes they do some culty stuff.
Yeah.
They don't, if the guys are given, some of the guys who are giving them the most money, they give extra attention to, don't want them watching other channels, things like that. I think like I'm probably more definitely, well, it's not probably more. I have a whole soundboard of Alex Jones. He said,
right now, I'm going to take a big old dump on the ground and then I'm going to throw it at you.
and he's someone's savior, right?
Yeah.
Like he said, famously, he's like,
Like I'm putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
but I think that the fact that he's entertaining, you and me, they were like, that's fucking ridiculous, right? But the fact that he's entertaining like that, I think what happens is that people like maybe not like me so much, but somebody like Media Matters or Right Wing Watch or some of these media watchdog groups will clip him out saying these ridiculous things, and you and me might laugh at him, but then his fans are like, oh look, they're going after you. They're
Uh,
taking you out of context. They're being very unfair to you with the chemicals in the water and the taking a dump on the ground and throwing it at people or whatever. And so it sort of allows them to build a bit of a persecution complex, which is,
uh-huh.
again, a way to manipulate your audience, right? If you manipulate your audience into thinking you're being persecuted because people are taking your words and then criticizing you for it, it's going to make people maybe come in just a little bit. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. Painting yourself as a victim seems to be a key part of it because if you're a victim, you can say, we're in this together. We have to fight the oppressor. We have to, protect each other. Only I can save you from the oppressor and things like that. And you know, this social media thing, it's really spreading a lot of craziness. Like I mentioned about the left wing and the right wing, it seems like there's kind of this coat around Donald Trump. People feel like Donald Trump, like, back to the victimization thing, people feel like only Donald Trump can save them. Like he is the savior, which is crazy because this guy only cares about himself. But, you know,
And maybe his daughter, who he's got a little bit of a odd interest in.
yeah, yeah. Like you
Or
said before, old guys and young women, man. You know, it's so what do you think about this and how do we go about like combating
I
this
think
kind of
all
stuff?
I think like on a structural level, I don't think I have the power really to combat it.
Hmm.
I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing and trying to inform people the best I can about, cults, conspiracy movements, extremism. But I think like what what I think as individuals, I think it's really important to remain like grounded. If you have, some people unfortunately don't have contact with their family through no fault of their own. But if you do, you pick up that phone every once in a while. Check in on your people. Your friend starts acting a little, check in on your people, especially if you're one of the more level-headed or maybe, I don't know, less emotional or less outwardly emotional people in your friend group. Maybe check in on your people. Check in on friends of friends who you met at a party if they seem to be wilding out. Check in on your sister if your sister seems to be having a hard time. That stuff goes a long way. And I think a lot of times before people go down whatever rabbit hole it is, right? Where they're a lot of times it's like a hyper focus on one thing in Scientology, the focus is on Scientology, but Alex Jones, the focus is on some dog whistly thing where they usually mean the Jews. And it's just a hyper focus. Oh, these motherfuckers are out to get me. Oh, and some motherfuckers actually are out to get you. We don't live in a kind world. But when you get I think just somebody, a friend, taking the time is going to stop somebody or at least slow somebody down so they have a little bit of time to think about, what they're doing and who they're cutting out of their life and what they're focused on. But structurally, that's that's you know that's the question. I don't have the answer for the structural stuff. You don't want government stepping in and telling people what they can and can't say because that don't work. You don't
Hmm.
really want the social media companies acting with a heavy hand because there's two sides of that. One, that heavy hand might smack the people it shouldn't smack in the first place because they use a computer program basically to figure out who that hand's going to smack. And then two, like you said about the persecution complex, like we were talking about that, the heavy hand of social media does smack the right person, kicks them off, like and Alex Jones for that Sandy Hook shit. Right. Well, now
Hmm.
he's been persecuted by Twitter and Facebook and Twitch and YouTube and all these places, and so that feeds into the persecution complex. So that's the big question, and I don't know if human beings are capable of, as individuals or as groups, of even answering that question. I mean, I don't, I had people like sometimes like young people will come into my Twitch channel and they'll be there for a little while. They'll be like, "You're the oldest doomer I've ever seen," because like because I don't I don't know what the structural answers to this are, and I think I don't think our politics, not just the United States, but I don't think any free or mostly free countries' politics are capable of dealing with this. And when you do see more heavy-handed, more authoritarian countries try to deal with it, you're like, well, shit, I certainly don't want that. Like
Exactly.
over in Russia, you can't. They control what social media you can use. In China, they control what social media you can use. Who the fuck knows what's going on in North Korea? Right? We don't want
Yeah.
none of that. But like any of the attempts to put the brakes on this in countries, in Europe, the United States, Australia, the freer parts of Asia, it doesn't work. And so
Yeah.
I think the best you can do is, I hate to say this because I don't like this. It's this neoliberal crap about it being about the individual. I think that's a lot of how we got here. But I think we are where we are, and the best you can do is think about the people in your life and try to help them when you can. And if your family is a churchy family, even if you're not a churchy person yourself, maybe check out that church once a month and see what's going on. What's your mom being exposed to at the church? You know, your sister likes to go to the club or whatever. Go to the club with your sister every once in a while, even if that's not your thing. Or, you know, you got an uncle that, you know, is watching too much YouTube. Sit down with your uncle and see what the fuck your uncle's watching on YouTube, you know? And it's, you know, that stuff seems like it's little, but, you know, I think luckily enough, and I don't, you know, I don't like really us versus them, but I do think that there are more of us who want to live in a good world where people have access to reliable information and can make decisions based on some version of reality, some version of their internal reality that matches with the outside world's reality. I think there's enough of us that if we treat people with kindness and try to help people when they start to stumble and start maybe falling down these rabbit holes, I think.
It's like we froze up again. Hold on. You still there? Oh, boy. Hey, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, it looks like we got froze up. Yeah, but I got the gist of what you were saying. Piggybacking off of what you were saying, what are some warning signs, people that should look out for? Because you were saying check in on your friends and family, but like what should we be looking for? What are some glaring red signs that go, hey, this might be a cult or a control group?
Um, I think if you get to the point where you think somebody might be in a cult, it might already be too late. I think
Mm,
I think it's about prevention, right? I think like there is no like model for getting somebody out of a cult, right? They used to have this deprogramming model where they'd kidnap you. That's kidnapping. Don't kidnap anybody, right? Even if they're in the
yeah,
cult, you don't do it. Don't do a kidnapping. Don't hire anybody to do a kidnapping. You go into jail.
yeah,
As well you should. You should not conspire to kidnap anyone. Um, you know, the warning signs are going to be like a lot of times the warning signs are going to be did something bad happen in their life, right? And can
yeah,
you, to the extent that you may have bad shit going on in your own life and you might not be emotionally available to help this person at this time, but maybe if you're not, talk to somebody else, right? Be like, hey mom, I'm going through it too, but right now, my sister, your daughter's having a rough time. You want to make sure you give her a call once a week. That kind, it's because people don't just out of nowhere end up, giving Alex Jones their money or joining Scientology or ending up, under the thumb of some influencer. Something happens, right? They end up, it's slow. They end up there somehow. Nobody wakes up and says, I'm gonna join a cult today. So I think, the warning signs are going to be different. Is somebody, is your friend used to be into cycling and now their bike's over there catching dust. You'd be like, wait, man, why don't you ride on your bike? What's up? You know, are they, I think an easy one probably is, are they losing interest in the things that you've known that they've always been interested in? Does this
mhm,
person collect vinyl and now they ain't touching their record player and they've always got their earphones in from their phone? You're like, well, you're probably not listening to music, right? Because you got a great vinyl collection over here. What are you listening to? Who's barking in your ear? Somebody likes
gotcha.
to read. Somebody likes to read, and now they're not reading anymore because they're watching YouTube all the time. You're like, hey, friend, why aren't you reading anymore? It's
You still there? Looks like we froze up again. I don't know what's happening, but we keep freezing up. Yeah, I don't know why we keep freezing up, man. I think Scientology is listening in. I think they're messing with our service.
they
I'm
were
not sure what's
they were messing with my lights last night. My lights were flickering a little bit.
yeah, it's crazy. Do the people who leave, do they ever like fear like retribution? Is that something that happens?
Not so much anymore. Scientology doesn't have enough people really to harass them, but maybe in the 2000s, yeah, they had a lot more members back then. Yeah, people got stalked. They would hire the private investigators to look into you. They would do they wouldn't try to hide it either. They'd do like noisy investigations so that you knew that they were investigating you.
Yeah, that's wild, man. You said they lost a lot of members?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they obviously don't publish member lists or whatever, but estimates are that they have less than 10,000 members in the whole world right now.
And why is that? It's just people have woken up to the fact that they're a cult.
Well, some people aged out and died. People can't grow your numbers if you can't recruit,
Yeah,
and it's pretty hard for them to recruit now, right? Because the everything that's been exposed about them on the internet.
exactly. I think I kind of credit South Park with that as well. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really know much about Scientology until South Park came on the scene and kind of exposed them, which is kind of goofy. But hey, they've done a good thing. That being said, what are some like other cults out there that are, I don't think there's anything as big as Scientology, or maybe there is. What are some cults that people need to be looking out for?
Well, the big one that went down recently, you've probably heard of Nexium.
Yeah, that was
Keith
wild.
Raniere and them. That was like a weird sex cult. After that got taken down, I think most people in their lives aren't going to be exposed to the sorts of traditional, and that's a weird word to use about a cult, right? But sort of what we traditionally think of as cults. I think that the new model is on the internet, and so I don't know. There's Telegram groups that are like cults. There's Facebook groups that are like cults, and all those are private. So you have to get invited, and so it's like hard for me to really know. It takes, if I found something, I'm like, oh, this seems a little culty. It's going to take me a while to even get in, right, to their online spaces because they're going to be pretty paranoid. So I think people should be, as far as like inoculating yourself and your loved ones, I think it could come from anywhere, like really. And I think right now the big problem is, like you were saying, influencers, but we associate that mostly with women on Instagram. There's a lot of men on YouTube who are influencers too. There's
Yeah.
that masculinity influencer stuff where it's like, this is how
hmm
you be a man.
Yeah,
That
Andrew
stuff.
Tate.
Yeah, that's Andrew Tate's a big one. There are smaller ones too, though, where, people have more direct access to the creator themselves. They form like a parasocial relationship with the creator. And I think when we use the word influencer, I think we need to make sure that we're not just thinking about somebody selling supplements or essential oil, like a woman, usually a pretty woman selling essential oils or whatever on Instagram, that we need to think of that more broadly. Anybody who has influence over a group of people is an influencer. I think that's where people are going now to get their cult, for lack of a better way to talk about it. Where did you get
Yeah.
your cult? Oh, I got it on Instagram. Oh, I got mine on YouTube. My cult came from TikTok.
Yeah, I think, the social media has changed the game. I saw something now. They have AI influencers, like they're using AI to create these pretty women. And, with that, they can create an infinite amount of content. So I think pretty soon we're going to have a cult that's following somebody that doesn't even exist, you know?
When that happens, we got to get back together and talk about it. But then I'll have to somehow make sure that it's really you
Oh, yeah.
that I'm talking to on the other end.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting because pretty soon you'll have a video and you'll be able to interact with that video, and it's just a computer, an AI simulation. We're getting it's we're living wild times, man. But
Yeah,
that
for
being
sure.
said,
Oh, do you remember that saying, "May you live in interesting times"? I think that now the new saying is, "May you live in less interesting times." Like if you're wishing something on somebody, right? You're like, "I hope your future is better. I hope things get just a little less interesting."
yeah, I wish things would get a little less interesting. That being said, tell me a little bit about the Echo Media. Is that a company that you own? Did you create it? And
Um, Yeah, it started. So we had a blog. It was called the Daily Echo, and I had this big ass apartment in West Silicon Valley when I was living a different life. And my friend who was working on the blog with me, I was like, "Well, you should take a room here. They're charging you too much rent at your other place. Take a room here." And so he started. We'd have people over, and most of us were DJs and musicians, so we'd be talking about music and hanging out. And he started calling the place the Echoplex. And so when we put up a website, we were just like, well, we need a name. We're bad at naming. This is Echoplex Media. The URL is available. And we started doing podcasts and stuff in 2015. The first show was just like a weekly news roundup. The second show that we launched was actually about local music, and all our friends that were in bands were coming on. We were interviewing them, talking to them about their band. Sometimes they'd play a little acoustic, or if they were rappers, they'd send us their tracks. They'd flow a little bit over it, or you know maybe they wouldn't perform at all and they'd just talk about their gigs that were coming up. but I ended up on the dystopia beat, because the news show ended up being more and more about that kind of stuff because I was interested in it. So when I was working full time, it was, 1 or 2 shows a week, sometimes even skipping weeks because I was busy with work. And then the pandemic hit, and I was like, well, if I'm going to jump into this, everybody's at home right now, so now's the time. And I started streaming every night and had to fill each night with content. So now we have a night about cults. Now we have a night about specifically conspiracy theories. Now we have a night that's all about local news, where we also cover like crazy people yelling at their school board or their board of supervisors, city council. We ended up canceling the music show because it was just, I was headed in a specific direction, and the music show it was too much work basically when I was going in that direction. Most of the people that started with us are no longer on the project because they got jobs. Mostly just me and my co-host for the Intellectual Dollar Tree HK, my co-host for Down Ballot. He calls himself the Councilman, which is a joke because he ran for city council and lost. And then my girl Ashley, the media wench, is my co-host she comes on late night or just whenever because she's more deeply involved and helps me with the marketing and stuff. So yeah, it started as almost nothing, and now it's what I do for a living. And it's hard but rewarding.
Yeah, sounds cool, man. All right, well, I'm definitely gonna check it out. Echoplex Media. Let the people know where they can go to find it. I know you mentioned about Twitch, and it's also a podcast as well, correct?
Yeah, the best place to go is just our website, echoplexmedia.com. It's got links to everything. You can find our merch, like this tinfoil hat I'm wearing right now. We've sold several hundred of these. You can pick one of these up. You'd look pretty good in this. We got beanies if that's your style. Yeah, our website. Most people will just want to send you to their Instagram or whatever, but all that stuff's on our website. You can find our Twitter. I think I need to update the contact page to include like Blue Sky or Mastodon or whatever, but most of our stuff's there. And you can certainly find our schedule there. And yeah, our podcasts are all on there. You got links to Spotify and Apple or whatever. That's the easiest. Plus, there's a blog there that people should read. Our blog, I call it the Defamation Times because I ain't got nothing nice to say about anybody on the Defamation Times.
Yeah, it's there's so much going on in the world, and that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, man. It's just there's so many issues that I feel the media doesn't talk about in enough detail, and they kind of might dwell on something for like a week, and then they move on to something else. And I kind of can't blame them because there's usually so much happening. And I guess I just started this podcast just to get the inside scoop on things.
The other
But
thing is
that
like
being
investigative reporting is expensive. There was a story, I don't want to get into it, but I was trying to chase down a story starting in June, and I just don't have the resources. So I ended up having to abandon it. And it's a pretty big deal, but I don't, and I just don't have the money, and very few people have the pockets to do that kind of stuff. And then once if you get to the point where you got somebody who has the pockets to do that kind of stuff, well, guess what? The person with you remember that golden rule, who has the gold makes the rules. Well, that's the new paradigm you might exist under as a journalist if somebody's funding your project. So it's real hard to do investigative journalism.
I'm curious, what was it? If do you feel comfortable talking about what that story was, or?
I'll just say that there is a cult leader in the anti-Scientology community.
Gotcha. All right.
I was the name of the article that I'm not going to be able to write probably is you can take the people out of the cult, but you can't take the cult out of the people.
Damn. Yeah, it's wild, man. It's everybody's looking for something. Everybody's looking for hope, and there's people out there who will prey on that. And I guess we just kind of have to be on the lookout. But this has been a great conversation, man. I really enjoyed this. I learned a lot. I definitely would love to speak to you again, especially about the international dark web, I think it's called, or
The
intellectual
dark web. Yeah. Yeah, that's our most popular show it's called the Intellectual Dollar Tree. It's obviously a play on the intellectual dark web. It's our most popular show. and it's the main reason people write me nasty emails.
Oh man. All right. Well, hey, I would definitely like to get into that. But hey, this has been awesome. Thank you for coming on, David. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on too.
Hey, no problem. Take it easy.
Yep.
All right, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us for another enlightening conversation here on Bright Brains. I hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to fuel your own bright ideas. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform or however else you listen to this podcast. Also, we can be found on all major social media. Just type in Bright Brains with a Z. And remember, the brightest minds are those that never stop seeking knowledge.